The Human-Centered Design UAE Meetup. My name's Jonathan Steingesser. I'm the founder of the Meetup, and really excited to be in this beautiful space for the first time. Huge thank you. Big round of applause. Thank you, Gabriele, Francesca. If you're wondering a little bit about the space, I just want to let Gabriele say a few words.
Just a few words. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for organizing it. It's a pleasure for us to host this event to such a beautiful community. So Isola Space is actually a place taught for the community, mainly creative communities. We are a company based between Milan and Dubai. We organize events in the design industry since almost 10 years. So we work mainly in for Milan Design Week, London Design Festival, Dutch Design Week, and since a few years also Dubai Design Week. We work with independent designers, so whatever you see in this space tonight is made by a designer, a young design studio, like from different parts of the world. Everything you see is on sale, so like designers have a chance here to showcase and sell their products. And so we have a cafe, we have a workspace. Designers can come here and spend time like working on their projects, connecting. That's the idea of the space. And then of course, like we organize events. So most of the activations we do here are like private events or meetups, networking events, and like this one. So I'm very happy again to have you here tonight. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we like I shared with our hosts, we've been looking for a space for a long time. So really hoping that Dubai traffic doesn't keep a lot of our community away, and we can make it work. Really beautiful space, and nice to. I love the entrance, you know, where design happens. Another huge thank you. I'm standing in front of the screen, not a good idea. To our partners, Aspects, Peter McIntosh, Jack Kidd. They're around here somewhere. They're in the back. Peter has spoken up here, so they're not shy to speak. We'll get Peter in 2026 again on a panel. Aspects are a specialist recruiter in the design creative space. Also, they're exploring, they've got some new spaces that they're working in. And they're seeing, I've had some great feedback from them. The design community, the design scene is really picking up. So huge thanks for the partnership. If you are looking to build a team, hire designers, you are a designer, have a chat to them, have a chat to somebody in their team. They're always looking to help you out. So thanks again, guys. About a year ago, we launched our minimum viable product of our website. So you can check out our events. We're going to do a little bit more with the website this year, hcd.ae, shortest URL I've ever had the pleasure to have. So check it out. And I've got a couple of things to announce tonight, very exciting. We're also on the socials. I didn't add, but it's quite easy to spell. It's over there if you're not sure. Isola Space. So please tag Isola Space. Welcome, you made it. Look at that, all the way from Abu Dhabi. 2.5 hours later. Wow, that's commitment. Mohammed's also here from Abu Dhabi and took a wrong exit. Also took him a long time, so thank you, Mohammed, as well. HCD UAE on Instagram, Aspect Social, and Isola Space as well on the Instagram and also on LinkedIn. So I always encourage people who are looking, even if you're not, write about tonight, write about the space. What did you like? It's okay to use AI, but add some human in there too. Make it authentic. It's a great way to let people know that you're real, you're authentic, you're part of the community. You're not just a robot. If it is your first time, since COVID, we've been recording our events. We are recording tonight as well. So you can check out on YouTube, Human-Centered Design Meetup. We've got 53 videos. And in the last 6 months, our quality got a lot better because we had microphones, as I said that. Great timing. So yeah, check it out. We do have a lot of new faces. So I just wanted to quickly tell you a little bit about the Meetup. We started back in May 2013. So this year will be 13 years, and 9 people RSVP'd. 3 people showed up, my boss and my colleague. And it was just a book club in those days. It was UX Abu Dhabi in Caribou Cafe and Marina Mall. And then After a short while, I saw there wasn't a lot in Abu Dhabi in those days. Today, thank God, it's much bigger. So I was driving to Dubai. I was based in Abu Dhabi, UX UAE. And we've had a lot of events over the last few years. We've organized a conference as well. I'll share with you a little bit more about that if you're not aware. Next weekend, we are co-organizing a conference over 2 days. And yeah, partnered with a lot of great organizations. So 95 events, almost 9,000 participants, 2 conferences. And I will be sharing something very exciting that I've wanted to do for a long time. And it feels like, with Aspects, Peter, Jack, and Chris, I think we missed, you're not on the slides, are you, Chris? I think we missed that slide.
Well, you've got a team enough. That's fine. I'll talk in a minute.
So yeah, that's quite exciting. I'll announce that shortly. One thing also that's worked really well, last year we ran some portfolio critiques, and we spoke about what a design critique is. And we did a talk as well at New York University, Abu Dhabi. Tomorrow, Chris and I are guest speakers at RIT, which is also really exciting. We're growing that connection with the tertiary sector. And tomorrow is a closed event, but there will be, we're going to talk about what is a great portfolio. And then in a few months' time, we're going to have a public event at RIT, at the university. It's here in Dubai Silicon Oasis, to mix for all of you, for students, and to mix together and for them to build that bridge between studying and the workplace. So as I was saying, actually, I think I'm going to pass to you, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Chris is going to tell you about DDX.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah. Although some people think it, we're not actually brothers. I just look more like his brother than his actual brother does. But yes, we are at DDX next weekend. This is by far one of the best events of the year, I think, when it comes to the design calendar. Last year, I had the privilege of doing a talk with this man here, and the feedback and the audience, the questions, the networking was just top notch. So again, HDD is partnering with DDX to do this, also with the help of Aspects. Lots of really good stuff. As I said, there's lots of great talks. We have a few people here today who are actually doing talks. Brenton over there, I know, is doing a talk. Always great content. There's also the after party on the first night, sponsored by Aspects as well. Really good networking. This time I'll definitely make it down. Last time I couldn't, sadly. Lots of really great stuff and some really big speakers as well. There's just a few faces, some you may recognize, and there's lots more on top of that too. So really great content. This guy will be hosting, not an easy task, but a very important one, and also doing a talk about what we do together at the Early Childhood Authority and doing government differently. Some really, really good stuff in there that you can apply to anything that you do. And this guy is also doing a talk and a talk/workshop. So if you could make it, I'd appreciate it. I've been working on it for quite a long time. So there's some good stuff in there as well. So one about presenting. It's not about confidence, it's about noise and getting rid of that. And another one about the stories that we use in our work at the Abu Dhabi government and how to make change and bring lots of different types of people, entities together. So some really valuable stuff in there that I think everyone can relate to. You can still get tickets and you can get a discount if you use this QR code. If you don't have one yet, I suggest using it. It's great value for a 2-day conference, it really is. There's so much stuff in there. It's super great value. And there's some big names as well coming in from abroad, albeit digitally, like the one and only Don Norman. So yeah, big names. So yeah, come on down, it's gonna be great. And in the classic Apple style, one more thing.
Thanks, Chris. So, like I said, I do have a pretty big announcement, which we've been working with Aspects as well in the background. And 13 years, we've tried many different things. We do events both Abu Dhabi and Dubai. We've tried to do panels. We've done critiques. We've done fireside chat, talks, a lot of different things. And that's not going to change. That's going to stay free for the community. We enjoy it. We love the dynamic. But one thing that has come up over the past few years is that, okay, the talks, the workshops, the talks, the panels, etc. are great, but how do I apply this? How do I transfer from listening to actually practicing and doing? So this year, we're going to be launching in Q2, Chris and I, with Aspects as well, something new called HCD Pro, where you'll get to learn and try and apply a lot of what we're talking about. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. We might answer some of them, we might not, might leave you in suspense. And without further ado, I want to just quickly introduce our next speaker. She's been in Dubai for a little while, but about 6 months ago or so, she came onto our scene and has come to every event, every meetup since. She's got a lot of great experience in strategic design, clients all over the world. And she's the co-founder of the Sifer network and a great strategic designer. Julie, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. Just give us a moment, we'll bring up the slides.
That was quick.
So, when I was 5, I was outside playing on a chilly summer's day. It was chilly because I grew up in the northern part of Denmark. We don't have warm summers like you do here. Anyways, I was outside playing with my friends. We were playing hide and seek. I had found the best hiding spot. And then I got stung by a wasp. And to my recollection, that is the first time I've ever been stung by a wasp. And it stings, right? It hurts. It shocks you. So there I was, jumping out of my perfect hiding spot, and the person who it saw me, and I was the first one to be found, which meant I had lost that round of hide and seek. I was fuming, so I stamped indoors, slumped myself into the sofa, arms crossed. On the other sofa, I did notice my teenage brother. I have 4 older brothers. My teenage brother stretched thin, almost 2-dimensionally on the other sofa, reading a book. But I was fuming. Preoccupied with my anger, I started on a rant out loud about why are there wasps? What is the purpose of wasps? Why do they exist? What about ants? What about mosquitoes? For some reason, I stayed in the insect realm. I don't know why. And then my brother looks up with this really tired look, and he goes, "What is the purpose of humans?" And the room grew really large around me. 5 years old, my palms got really sweaty, and I looked up and I realized, I have no idea. So that kicked off a pursuit of purpose, of meaning. What drives people? What motivates them? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Why do they get up in the morning? Why don't they get up in the morning? Fast forward, I'm Julie Ricks. Jonathan did a little introduction. I'm a strategic designer, and in fancy terms, I like to say that I operate at the intersection of design, strategy, and business. I have over 2 decades of experience. There goes my age. I have had the privilege of working with very talented and diverse teams on multiple different projects, very, very different clients, very, very different continents as well, except Antarctica. I think I've covered everyone except from that one. And I've had the pleasure of working on a range of projects. I'm just going to skip through a few here. One was an onboarding journey for new hearing aid users. We said, hey, how can we welcome you to a new world of sound in a delightful manner? I have worked as a CTO, reconnecting refugees in last mile environments in Africa with lost loved ones, torn apart by wars and natural disasters. I have had my first Saudi client working on a fintech company, bringing experience, cohesiveness, as well as flipping their business model, or at least attempting to, as a strategic designer. I have also dived in and designed, together with a great team, the experience layer of an AI-powered distributed operating system for what is a major consumer electronics company. And then I've also had the pleasure of working in education. This one was engaging parents and caregivers in their child's sort of game adventure, learning adventure. And one really, really weird comment I once got from a client was, he said at the end of the project, "You're like the female equivalent to Mr. Wolf." You may not know this movie, it's one of my favorites. So Mr. Wolf is a character in a movie called Pulp Fiction by Quentin Tarantino. Now, Mr. Wolf's role, his job, is basically to come in and clean up sticky situations for criminals, or at least caused by criminals. Now, it was actually meant as a compliment, but at first I was a bit like, really? That's how you see me? Because first of all, I don't just barge in, guns blazing, and telling my clients what to do. And I certainly don't bark orders at anyone. However, I have found myself in a few sticky situations over the years, being pulled into various projects with various clients in various sectors. And what I've met, and this is in the wake of management consultants, I think actually in the announcement of this talk, it was dubbed as consultants. It's management consultants. And typically what we come across as teams coming in, and me personally, is $1 million horoscopes. It looks really, really great. Here's what you should do. A strategy, but not a process following it. A lack of capacity building. Teams and organizations left with a now what? And a load of dependencies. And there's a good business in that, isn't there? Creating dependencies for your clients because they might come back. That means more money. Great. But also leading to a consultancy fatigue. Now, at first, I had in mind talking about this landscape of management consultancies. What's moving up there right now? What are we seeing? What's changing? But I would rather talk about a lived experience that I had in the recent years. And it's actually one of my favorite projects. Now, I'm not allowed to say who this is, so I strike it through so you can't see it. But it's a leading global pharma company. And the final outcome was what we dubbed as the expert's tool for insulin optimization. And it was a really, really close collaboration with the client. And it spanned a total over 3 years in 3 phases, maybe 2.5. And we worked really, really, really closely with the client. I'm going to get to that part, but also with very renowned healthcare professionals and experts to make this tool for the endocrinologists. But what we met at first, just to give a few pieces of the status quo, was a 300-page strategy report wrapped in a PowerPoint. Oh, it looks really nice. There's a lot of action points, right? But also a lot of research, both done by the company internally, by the medical teams and researchers, but also by the management consultants, but all buried in Teams folders and not really made use of. And then an actual 2-year roadmap. I still come across that sometimes. I'm looking at it, I'm looking at that roadmap and I'm thinking like, this is dominated by market trends and features. It's not values driven, it's not outcomes driven. And no one really understands what those features are doing there. And a lot of times it's just competitor benchmarking. Also, very importantly, a lack of framework and execution. The teams are left with that question. Now what? Okay, we're going to do this and then we're going to have success. What we also found was an innovation team stuck in their tracks. They'd actually built up an innovation lab, and that was really trending over the past decades for pharma companies to do that. Let's establish an innovation lab, spit out a lot of apps, patient care, patient lifestyle apps, and so on. But where was the actual sort of model in this? What was the driver, especially what was the business driver in this? Was it just virtue signaling? And of course, we were left with a shoestring budget because most of the money had been spent. Now, the equation that they had been given looked like this. So, the said pharma company had produced a smart pen for insulin dosing that would feed that data into a patient app that they had launched. This app was loaded with lifestyle suggestions for type 2 diabetics. One thing to do was digitizing the patient reports. That was the missing component of this equation for them to succeed, according to the report. Because then, voila, they would have an ecosystem for insulin management, and they would have very, very happy patients, happy to use their pen. Success. Now, we were brought in to digitize this patient report. And by we were a small, lean team. And they said, just digitize this. Turn it from a static format into a dynamic and visually pleasing experience for the healthcare professionals. But then we started looking into the research and diving in and talking to the endocrinologists, talking to the healthcare professionals, talking to the people living with diabetes. And we said, well, first of all, there are some patient socioeconomic factors here, right? And also just improving their quality of life. You can actually improve the quality of life with a person living with type 2 diabetes before they manage their insulin. Before that, you shouldn't even think about introducing suggestions such as change of diet, get better sleep, exercise. First, you need to simply manage their insulin levels, hypo and hyper events. I'll try not to get too technical. I hope I don't lose you. Secondly, the reports are really, really complex. There are multiple pages. They're even complex for the experts, the endocrinologists, the experts treating people living with diabetes. There are multiple pages, often in print or PDF. And that exact report was the ask from the client. Take that, digitize it, make it dynamic, make sure that the data from the pen is fed into this report. Thirdly, type 2 diabetes is an actual epidemic in the US. We have over 42 million people living with type 2 diabetes in the US, and only 8,000 endocrinologists. They're experts. And that number was stagnant. There was actually no more endocrinologists coming to the scene, pretty much. That meant most of this load of caregiving was placed on the general healthcare practitioner. But they're not equipped to treat people with type 2 diabetes. They don't know how to. And an app is not going to solve that for the patients, because they're just being pushed a lot of data they can't make sense of. Then they're going into a consultation, meeting a doctor who can't even make sense of it either. So, millions of dollars spent on yet another patient lifestyle app. So we went in and started this conversation with the client, and we said, we need to take a different approach here. We need to look at this differently. So let's take a step back and create a new brief together. Let's design the strategy together. Run the process, build the capacities together. Think of this as a modular approach instead of a checklist. We're just checking off, we did the right thing, we're following the recommendations of the report, and then we've set up success. Because also what they saw was there was a really, really low uptake on the app, right? And they hadn't figured out why. It wasn't just an overwhelming amount of features and lifestyle recommendations. It was something more. So we went into capacity building with them. That was really, really the first focus. The project spanned over 2 years in 3 phases. We had a few breaks in between where the client had to reassess, free up more resources, and battle some internal politics as well. We were a small core team. On the client side, the main stakeholders were the Chief Innovation Officer and the Chief Medical Director. And especially the Chief Medical Director had a colossal fatigue for consultants. The first time I met her, and she's a very impressive person, by the way, and she's very tall too. She's 76 and very active. And I met her at a workshop in Boston. And I walk up to her like very excited. I go like, hi, I'm Julie Riggs. And she goes like, yeah, I know. I was like, okay. Anyways, through this capacity building, we started building trust with the client, right? And not just through a human connection and a good sense of humor, but also on really, really quickly identifying what would make the most impact the fastest. Of course, this area of expertise requires some really, really deep domain immersion in order to sort of recognize what are the patterns and where can we see the value. A modular approach for proof of work. What I mean by that is, don't see this as a sequence. See this as how do you identify the first modules in this, like I said, for the fastest impact and proof of work. And also what's really key, and something I always bring with me, and I think a lot of people can maybe recognize that, instead of stakeholder management, think of it as stakeholder engagement. Engage them, they have to participate, they have to be hands-on, sort of need skin in the game in their investment as well, instead of just putting it on a bunch of consultants and then when shit hits the fan, you can always blame them. Also, interchangeable team as per needs, both for our little core team. So instead, and speaking a little bit to the agency model as well, instead of having a fixed team, think of it having a little core team and be interchangeable and pull in people as per needs basis, the right profile at the right time. That also applied to client side, actually. We could do the same with them. So we had those two main stakeholders, we could pull other profiles and people in as needed. And really important, through the work, through the hands-on work, build and augment internal teams. Find the right profiles, find the right engagement, excitement, knowledge, expertise, and so on. Bind them together and start building those internal teams, because that's part of the capacity building once you've left. And really importantly, establishing that shared clarity of purpose. With the patient then, their value proposition was, we have a smart pen, it logs doses and timing of doses. That data is fed into an app. That's going to be great for the patient because then they can make sense of it. But they hadn't actually thought it through. They hadn't thought it to the extent of, but does that make sense for the patient? And also, what about the doctor? Typically what you see in pharma is it's a patient-centric approach. It's very rarely a doctor-centric approach. But it's the healthcare profession has to make sense of all this data coming in and having it more easy access to it. So we went into this approach or method of modular scaling, and we flipped it around and said, don't go patient-centric first, go doctor-centric first. Build up a tool for the experts. This was also the thing. These 8,000 endocrinologists, because they were working in printed versions and PDF versions, no one was tracking their patterns. No one was monitoring them, putting together, thinking about how that feeds into the outcomes for the patients and vice versa. So it seemed like a bit of a gold mine. And so instead of starting with the patients, let's start with building a core tool for the experts, the endocrinologists. Capture their patterns, how they prescribe, what the adjustments do they do to insulin and so on. And then from that, starting to build smart capabilities, design an algorithm to really assess these events, which is creating tailored clinical recommendations for the general healthcare practitioners who, like I said, don't have the expertise in this domain. So make it accessible to them as a tool that any healthcare professional can use to optimize quality of life for people living with diabetes. Ultimately, and that's when you become patient-centric, and that's when you can start working in the app, serving up actionable insights that are also tailored to the individual patient needs. Also because, and that was the argument for this actually, flipping it from patient-centric to doctor-centric, was the last missing piece that hadn't been uncovered, which is, what's the profit driver for this, right? Or is it just a virtue signaling project? When we started uncovering this with the client, we hadn't actually thought about this, because who prescribes the insulin? Who prescribes the smart pen? The healthcare practitioner. Who's going to buy them? Such as pharmacies or sales teams coming out to the healthcare practitioners. And also insurance companies might have a vested interest in treatment adherence from their customers. And that was one of those really aha moments. No one had uncovered that at all, flipped that around from patient-centric to doctor-centric and finding that profit driver. And that was a much more sound business for a pharmaceutical company than going into the app space of a lifestyle experience for patients. And this is a little quick view of it. And actually along the way, because we're working really, really closely with the leading experts in this insulin optimization, I can tell you this is one of the most complex projects I've ever worked with. I'm just breezing across it, scratching the surface. But at the end of this project, during client sessions, suddenly IP lawyers started showing up in our calls. And we were like, who are you? Oh, I'm John, the IP lawyer. Okay, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm just observing. We knew we were onto something, right? That went beyond an expert's tool for insulin optimization. And as it turned out, we did actually, together with the client, invent a new data visualization that is starting to impact how insulin is assessed and optimized across the US. It's called dosing signals. I could talk about it for hours, but fortunately for you, I'm not allowed to. It's seeking patent, and publication. And they are actually building this tool and starting to roll it out. And that brings me to the last piece of this talk. That's when we started seeing all the right pieces coming together. I think I've named this picking up the pieces. And it's in the wake of management consultants. There were a lot of pieces, but they weren't the right pieces that were pieced together, you know what I mean? This is another of my favorite movies, and I apologize for the movie references if you haven't watched them, but this is the dude, right? And at one point in the movie, he says, that rock really tied the room together, man. And that's what happened. And that's what happened through capacity building, co-creation, joint forces, a one-team ethos with the client. And also, don't start out big. Don't go in massively and say, this is all the things we need to do, because you actually don't know. And that's what I call the $1 million horoscopes, right? You don't know until you start identifying the first areas or items or modules. Test them. See what flies, see what works. What do you uncover along the way? Stay really, really versatile. And then just lastly, putting this up against each other, strategy reports versus strategic design. I always think about strategy reports when I see them and hear about them and encounter them in my work as spreadsheet gymnastics, very comprehensive frameworks. Oftentimes they look good and market trends and then delivered by ChatGPT, because I think there were a few of those items in the news last year. Versus strategic design, which is co-designing, implementing, and running the system that delivers through capacity building and clarity of purpose. Which brings me back to the WASP, where I began. Clarity of purpose. And that pursuit of purpose that I believe a lot of people have, or should have at least, and also integrity. And when it comes to my purpose, or maybe to make it less sort of theatrical and existential, but my professional objective or my success criteria is to make myself obsolete. Thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, right.
Yes, we have a few. I have a few, but I'll save them.
Yes, good evening all. Mike Thompson, I'm a management consultant. If you want me to be
Hi.
now, I shall.
No, please stay.
No, I concur totally. Thank you, Julie. It's great. I mean, my world is in change management. And so essentially I'm involved in the 3 Ps, people, profit, process. But I totally concur that to deliver change, it has to be within, and it has to be understanding people across the business, but also bringing in all the relevant frameworks. I think I've worked a little with design clients, well, it's probably less design, but artists, which are great, creative breeds. But once you can tap into their energies within the business, you have a win. But the deal is that you've also got to be able to park things which they've got used to doing in change, and people have built up to that, me included. It's stuff that we've done and we certainly think it's the right thing. But what sounded like you were saying there is you bring in fresh eyes, but you accept it's people in the business, across the business, different stakeholders that drive it. But I totally also agree, in my world I do 2 things. One, I do investor readiness programs, but I also go into change management. But a good friend of mine in the UK actually tells me what my job is in that side. And he says, when people ask what your job is, can I please tell them? So I say, yeah, sure. So Mike, what is your job? And he's behind my shoulder nodding, and he says, his job is to leave. So that's the feeling I've got, is the ability to be able to help, support, infuse change, but be able to step back and then go back perhaps 2 years later and they're doing something different and better and moving on. So thank you, I really love the conversation, love the talk.
Thank you so much.
Any comments or? I mean, it wasn't really a question.
Well, no, it was a great comment, and
A
it
great
was
comment.
also great insight. I agree about leaving, right? And that's to my point of making myself obsolete. It's also a bit weird statement, maybe, but it doesn't mean that clients don't come back, right? Like you said, then they're doing something new, right? And I think what you're saying, it works from within, and also coming down to that people connection, right? Measurable outcomes, of course, and do it fast. do it in small measures as well, instead of doing grand gestures and like I said, 2-year roadmaps. Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yes, I knew you'd get a question from Brendan.
Great talk. Really enjoyed it. You talked about the dosing signals as the data visualization. You've also created a product which needs to be very clinically correct and clinically validated because people's lives depend on that. How did you go about creating that new data visualization, but then giving it to the hands of the people who would rely on that day to day? And it's a different visualization to what they'll be used to. What was the kind of management of that in particular?
You mean the management of putting it into their hands?
Yeah, for them to quickly understand that because their insulin is so important to them and measuring that insulin, but it's a new data visualization in itself. How did you go about introducing that new data visualization to people who rely on it day to day?
You're thinking about people living with diabetes. Yeah. We started with the endocrinologists, right, to overlaying what was already in the report, and then creating those new combinations of data visualization. In this case, I'm not really allowed to talk about it. But actually, we did
It's okay, it's only
a different version of it for the patients, which was more actionable insights. I can just briefly say that the dosing signals showed on the I know you work in health, so ambulatory glucose profile, and then we took the insulin dose, the timing of the dose, carb intake, right, exercise, so different metrics. But even if the patient didn't actually log a meal, those dosing signals started showing spikes for hypo and hyper in the insulin, right? That could actually detect almost down to the number of grams of carbs they've taken in their meal, right? That's pretty neat. So taking that and then translating that into an actionable insight for the patient, saying, you know what, you should probably take your bolus 30 minutes before bedtime instead of 2 hours before bedtime. Those kind of changes, and those are quite actionable, right?
So it was, I guess what we're leading to then is their identity. I guess it's their identity change, right? It's trying to change them from seeing it as a burden, so to speak, but then actually being able to deliver and manage it a lot way, and that was probably decision factors with the new data visualization itself.
It definitely was, because what we also see, especially with people like living with type 2 diabetes, they're not very active actually in their own journey of care or caregiving. Right? They just rely on the insulin, but they also don't have the right insights to be active and act upon it.
Oh, Chris, go for
I'm going to scale it because it's next to me. If the problem is the consultancies coming in and delivering these massive, overly worked, some would say, proving the worth of all the teams they brought in, having worked in consultancies myself and been part of these teams, do you think the problem is actually to flip it around, is to try and educate the consultancies or take it back to them? Dangerous question, I know, but what are your thoughts?
Well, no. I think it's a question of that there's actually an alternative that you should probably choose instead. Right? That's more lean, it's more modular. I don't want to say agile, I think that sits with software development and it's very sequential. But there's an alternative approach, an alternative measure, right? Like I mentioned, the issue I've seen again and again is that now what? Do you actually have the in-house and internal capabilities to see this through? In most cases, no, you don't, right? And then you have an extra expense of starting to hire in agencies, more consultancies, to actually do the work. Right? So, no, I would say, death to management consultancies, probably. Sorry, not to change management.
Any follow-up, Chris? Oh, we've got a few at the back. I did kind of have, just with Chris's line of thought. Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'll save mine for the end.
All right.
Could you please expand on the make yourself obsolete? Because I believe in the same thing. Any system should be designed well enough and efficient enough to not need people to run it. Could you expand on that?
I think you still need people to run the system. I've also deliberately not mentioned AI tonight. I think there's enough people talking about that right now. No, there's still people who need to run a system. Of course, you can automate, you can optimize, but when it comes to an organization, and value drivers and profit drivers and business objectives, and how that carries and translates into a great, be it profitable product experience for the end users. There will still be people in the equation. For me, when I go in, wanting to make myself obsolete as a strategic design consultant, it is the fact that I can walk out the door confidently knowing that they have now built up the capacities to run everything themselves. I'm not saying that that happens 100% of the time. It happens sometimes, few times, and then it happens somewhat, right? But yeah, that's the aim.
We've got a few here, but yeah, let's go with the back.
Hi, I just wanted to ask when you were talking about how you kind of discovered an IP. So my kind of question was, it's like, how do you translate like an abstract strategy into something like a product design team, a product designer like myself can build?
You're talking about the IP discovery we did with the new data visualization. Yeah, I mean, there was a ton of research internally in the company that we dug through. We started talking to the experts, we started talking to healthcare professionals, we started talking to patients. And the initial ask from the client was digitize these reports, make it a visually appealing and beautiful and easily accessible experience. So of course, over many, many iterations with the clients and leading experts in the field, we kind of reached that point where we said, this is more than just a product. This is more than just a tool, right? This turned into an academic project, actually, right? With our publishing papers, they're seeking the patents. With that being said, it's still a product. It's something that will improve the management and how healthcare professionals actually access and read and decipher these reports in a much easier way. What they're seeking to do is to change the US standard, how they're going to go about this, which I believe is a much better business model for a pharma company, like I said, than a patient lifestyle app. So that in itself is product design, but not as we typically think of product design. Right? But we applied the same methodology, the same process. Right? We iterated, we experimented, we tested, we validated, and we went so deep into this domain and into this expertise. At one point, we had an technologist asking me and the product designers, but you're clinicians yourself, aren't you? And we were like, no, we're designers. Right? So to that extent, right? Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Good evening, Julie. My name is Alex. Very impressive presentation. Thanks a lot for sharing. I was actually curious. I wanted to ask you, so how are you able to differentiate yourself from the management consultants and other consultants, right, when it comes to strategic design consulting, specifically with the chief medical officer who had consultant fatigue? This is something that I've also in my professional career faced a lot, not as a management consultant, as a chemical industry consultant.
Oh.
So yeah, I'm interested to hear this from you.
Good question.
Approach. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I think I know her fatigue stemmed from receiving these reports. And then there was no really sort of action items involved, right? Again, back to the capacity building. At the end of the project, she came to me. We met up in San Diego, had a last workshop. And she came to me and looked at me and I was like, yes. And she said, you know, when I first met you, I was very skeptical. I was like, yes, I sensed that. What changed? And she said, you really understood what we were trying to do here as a company and as people in this company. And you brought us along the way. So when we did the one team ethos, it wasn't like, we're going to do the one team ethos. We did it incrementally, right? Building that trust, also through a sense of humor. And being hands-on with them, working very, very closely with them. Right? Instead of just saying, this is what you should do, and telling us what we should do as well.
Recommendations and then stepping back.
Yeah, but then what happened was, instead of us and them, we turned into a we. It changed in the terminology. When we first started working with them, and we were on calls with them, because we were in Denmark and Sweden, and they were in Boston, they always had their camera off. Right? Just camera off. That's just a normal thing to do, right? And then it was we. How do we go about this? How do we solve this? Should we look into that, right? And also at the end of the call, we had the medical director sitting there knitting for her grandchildren and chit-chatting about her hikes in Bolivia. So that was the level of engagement we got from them, right? We were all on board together to do this. Especially when we had that big Lebowski moment and we saw we've actually uncovered something that's not just novel, but true innovation. So instead of serving recommendations, engage. Right?
Speak their language as well.
Speak that language, engage.
I don't want to switch mics because it's a crossover. I did just on that, sorry Julie,
Oh, you
couldn't
go.
help
Wait,
it.
wait.
I wanted to just share a quick little story. So Chris and I, as he was saying, we work at the Early Childhood Authority in Abu Dhabi. And like everywhere in the UAE and internationally in Australia, UK, etc., we use consultants in government. But Chris and I are internal, and we are not consultants. We are part of the internal team. We worked on a project, which I won't give too much detail about. It's not about the project, but we were asked, there's already a large consultancy working with us. They've been working with us for many years. They have expertise over time. And we were asked to support this project from internal management, let's say higher ups. The consultancy viewed us as, okay, I got to work with these innovation people, these designers, like, what are they going to add? We know it all. And from that very first meeting, we gathered that, and we were very quick to your question on differentiation to say, we are not here to tick boxes or to do theater design or do something for the sake of it. If there's nothing we can help with, we got plenty of other work. And we have the backing and a great team and great management. And we did actually find a big gap because they don't have strategic design, this particular consultancy. And they also don't have the skill to create great stories. And the value we found was to summarize our internal tagline is we simplify to amplify. So we took what they created, and this is another shameless plug. Chris is going to talk about the story that we created. He's going to present that story and the behind the scenes around that story next week. So I invite you to come to DDX. But that story was really powerful because it was presented to 50 stakeholders across government and private sector. It was a 5-minute story. We summarized all of this management consulting theories and frameworks, and it united the room and just galvanized the message of what we're here to do. So I'm giving probably too much away. Sorry, Chris. He's like, look, give me daggers. But my point is we differentiate, which is hard. It's a great question. Many designers, I mean, we've got such a varied state of design in this country, right? And many designers, including a lot of people in this room, that's what we struggle with. I know what a design is. You're just a visual designer. You're moving pixels around. That's what you do.
That's what I thought.
You don't do research. You don't do strategy. That's all you do. How do you differentiate as a designer? And it's the same thing. How do you differentiate management consultant? Is you find the gap and the value, and something that AI won't give you, something that you, with your experience, can see that's missing, and I'm just going to do that. I'm not going to do all of this. I'm just going to do that. Sorry, couldn't help.
I love it.
We have a question here from one of our regulars.
Sit.
Hello, hi. Very nice talk. Something that you mentioned at the end that really stuck out to me was sometimes there'll be a lot of pieces, some right, some wrong. It's all about putting the right pieces together. So my question was, how do you choose the pieces of this abstract puzzle that you have? Like one of them could be one team ethos, one could be a modular approach. One could be focusing on all the parties involved, like the practitioners and the patients and the healthcare. So how do you pick the right pieces to solve this
Life experience.
Good question, thank you. It actually all sums up into that modular approach. Right? So within each module, there can be different pieces. Again, the approach with the client, sort of very sort of common methodologies, of course, co-creation, workshops, engagement, diving really deep into the subject matter expertise. That's why I used this example today, because it required so much of that. And then what's really, really a key driver is, I think, does this make for a sound and profitable business? Right? I've worked quite a lot in healthcare, actually, and quite often I get the question, and also with plenty of pharma companies, this is not the only one, and sometimes I get the questions from fellow designers, don't you find it unethical to work with pharma companies? But I don't see anything unethical in working with a company and helping them become profitable and sustainable. You I think that's very ethical, in fact, to create that instead of having companies the likes of Amazon who takes up cheap loans just to oust their competitors. So that's one key driver. What drives the profit and what drives a healthy business? As designers, we're very user-centric, right? This is the human-centered design event. But I still think we tend to make the mistake to think that the user we're focusing on is called the end user, the end receiver of the app, for instance, or the end receiver of the platform. But an organization has a plethora of users, right? And you have to take them into considerations. And then what drives a healthy, good, profitable business? That's the key lens.
Nice. Great point to end on. Julie will stick around, so if you have any questions, Bill, jump in. Like I said, next weekend we've got a conference. We are taking a break for Ramadan, like we do every year for 13 years, and post Ramadan we'll make some announcements. We'll have more events, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So thanks everyone for coming. Our hosts are still here. If you have any questions about the space, you want to buy a $30,000 lamp, go for it. And yeah, enjoy. Some of us, if you're interested, might be, if you're not doing dry January and you are interested in do drink, there's a place next door a little later, but otherwise, coffee shop's open. Have a great night. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks again.